We have an incredible product, an incredible environment to harvest wild catch in, and a great story to tell. So we sort of decided that Chatham Island Food Co.'s vision and purpose was to create more value for our industry and make sure that it remained on the island to help sort of grow and empower the community. So that's really what's been driving us since then.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. I'm John Susman. Way out in the Southern Ocean, 800 kilometres away from civilization, it is literally the edge of the earth. It takes a certain type of character to survive in this kind of isolation, but for local people, it is simply a way of life. For the 600 or so people that live on the Chatham Islands, everything is self-sufficient. A place where 60-knot winds clear a straight run down to Antarctica. A place of surging seas and wild, unpredictable elements. The Chathams are part of New Zealand, but they are utterly remote. Running a seafood business from a port in a city can be a challenge. Running a seafood business from a place as remote as the Chatham Islands demands a level of resilience, commitment and passion unimaginable. Delwyn Tuanui is a 7th-generation Chatham Islander. Coming from a long line of island farmers and fishermen, Delwyn set up the Chatham Island Food Co. in 2011 as he wanted to share the island's great food with the rest of the world, today and tomorrow.
My family's been involved in fishing since as long as we've been here, really. As an Indigenous people, obviously it was a food source, and then as European settlers, my grandfather going back about 8 or 9 generations used to feed the whalers and sealers, used to grow mutton and potatoes to feed the whalers and sealers who were sort of harvesting around the islands, a couple of centuries ago. So I grew up on a sheep and beef property on the other side of the island, on the southwest side, and we have a farm there that runs along about 11 kilometres of coastline. One of my earliest memories of seafood interacting with our daily lives was actually, as a very young kid sitting on Dad's motorbike as we're sort of mustering sheep across these flats we have down on next to the ocean. Dad would always time his movement of stock with low tide, so that him and I could go out onto the reefs in our gumboots and pluck kinna off the rocks, and then he'd crack these kinna and put them in the front of his bike. And as he was mustering his sheep around, he'd be sort of sucking on these beautiful big fat kinna. So, that was probably one of my earliest memories of growing up where we grew up. And it's that's a pretty powerful memory for me, and it's something that we want to make sure our kids and their grandkids get to experience as they sort of grow into living on this island.
The climate is cold and windy and the landscape desolate, but it is the unique marine landscape that makes this place home to some of the highest quality seafood in the world.
So the Chatham Islands is a sub-Antarctic island. It's fairly windswept. We have a range of landscapes from sort of flat low-lying land to volcanic peaks, and it's home to around 700 locals. Many of us, including my family, have been here, since the Polynesians came out of the Pacific and sailed via stars. And we also have roots that connect us back to explorers, whalers and sealers who turned up here a couple of hundred years ago. So the Chatham Islands is primarily a fishing community. It's considered the last fishing community left in New Zealand. So that basically means that a big chunk, I think it's around 60 to 70% of our local economy is driven purely off fishing.
After returning home to his family farm on the Chatham Islands from studying abroad, Delwyn Tuanui challenged himself to find a new way to add value to his family farm and the island's community.
So I moved to Melbourne and I was studying, and as I was studying, I set up Chatham Island Food Co, and we were taking our produce, our wild harvest from the island and going direct to some of those magnificent chefs. Going into those restaurants in those early years and delivering to those chefs on a weekly basis, and then being able to have a coffee or even a cheeky beer on a Friday with them and drill into what drove them and their passions, was almost like an apprenticeship for me, because it opened my eyes up to the other end of the supply chain, to the passion, the enthusiasm, and the bloody incredible skills. And it really was, I look back on it now, it was a glimpse into another world. And it's a lot of those chefs really, I went there with a vision, and a belief in our produce and our story. And it was those guys in Melbourne and Sydney that gave me the confidence to say, hey, you do have something special to offer, and go for it. So it was an incredible journey, actually, an incredible way to educate myself. It's sort of, I guess, in some ways, some of those experiences have become our guiding principles on what's important when our product leaves the island. Because at the end of the day, yes, we've got a great product and a great story, but we need great customers at the other end, celebrating it either in their homes or in kitchens and restaurants to help it all work. So we moved back and I guess big ambitions, fresh out of university, and came back here after spending time with chefs. And took over an old fish factory, and went from dealing with a few kilos to quite a few ton a week. And when a local lad comes back and he's fresh out of uni, he jumps on a boat with a wily old fisherman who's got 20, 30 years experience, and tells him that he's doing it wrong. You sort of imagine how that went down. It was pretty tricky to start with. But it's really just about a journey, and it's about working alongside these guys, getting out on the boats. I spent a lot of time on the boats with them, just showing them different ways to improve the quality of their catch. And I guess at the end of the day, John, nothing speaks louder than an extra few dollars in the wallet at the end of the day. So making sure that, and I guess that's what value adding is all about, is it's about adding value. So we were able to get out on the boats, introduce new techniques around slurrying as soon as that fish is caught, to really lock in that freshness and that flavour, and taking all of those fishermen on the journey with us. And I'll tell you what, when you get a fisherman who's had very little focus or guidance on quality, all of a sudden you got a bloody upstarted university student badgering him every day, and then he gets to see a massive improvement on the quality of his fish. He gets to take some fillets home, and his wife's banging on about how much better it tastes now than it used to, and then his bank account's got a little bit more in it at the end of the week. You pretty quickly gather momentum and trust and belief, and it just snowballs. And I guess going out on the boats, getting dirty with those fishermen, getting involved with them, and taking them on that journey is what's enabled us to really lift our quality, lift the pride that they have in what they do, and feed that through to the market, and that quality and that pride is seen in the product, and obviously the customers see that, and it comes back to us in a positive way.
There's good reason Chatham blue cod is sought out by top chefs around the world. It's a unique and special fish, indigenous to the Chathams, with a delicate sweetness and fresh, subtle oceanic tang. It's got the hallmarks that only cold water wild fish taste of. In the colder months, when the fish fatten up, the flesh takes on a wonderful buttery richness, which makes for superb eating.
Yeah, it's an absolute iconic fish, especially when you sort of cross the Cook Strait and head south from the North Island. And it's something it's a species that's only found around the Chatham Islands and around the bottom end, primarily of the South Island. It's found nowhere else in the world. It's an inshore fish, which means it's living on reefs in depths of water from a few meters up to a couple of hundred, and incredibly robust hunter, and a very, very picky appetite. So they're scavenging around on the ocean floor, chasing paua and crayfish, as a big part of their diet. in really, really cold subantarctic waters, and you get a beautiful, sweet, delicate flesh. So something that we've been fishing out here for, I think it's something like 100 plus years now. It's been caught around the islands, thriving fishery, and absolutely beautiful. And it's something we as locals are incredibly proud of. And it's the species that, really got Chatham Island Food Co started.
Del sees his role as a custodian of the waters in which his team fish around the Chatham Islands. With a firm belief in working to the highest sustainable practices, they exclusively use pot and free dive hand harvest methods, which have remained the same for over a century. With zero bycatch, zero impact on the environment, and guaranteeing absolute premium quality, the Chatham Island Food Co prides itself on the highest moral and quality standards. It's tough, cold, and brutally dangerous work, but the results are without question.
So one of the things we focus on out here is our methods of catch, and it's something that my wife and I, when we started our business, was a real priority for us, is making sure that we believe in the catch methods that our fishers and our divers use. So our blue cod and crayfish are all caught in pots, and the kinner and paua are gathered by hand. So we have free divers diving for these things. They might go anywhere as deep as 20 odd meters, gathering with their hands off the bottom of the ocean floor. And kinner is one of those things that they're gathering. Kinner is, what I call the wild caviar of the Chatham Islands. It's essentially what it is. Really, really sweet, delicate flavour. Can be a bit of an acquired taste for some people, but again, really versatile if you're prepared to step outside of the circle a bit in the kitchen and experiment. We've got a diving community here of young men, primarily, and they're using small boats, 6 metre vessels, and they kit themselves up when the weather's good, and they can get out. They're out onto a reef, and spend the day diving for, the kinner or the paua, black abalone. Again, it was something that I did as a young guy. A magnificent job. It's cold, and you're working underwater all day, but very rewarding, both financially and physically and emotionally. It's great for the body and the mind, free diving, but it also comes with a huge amount of risk. Unfortunately, for our guys, the Chatham Islands is a hot spot for great white sharks. And, I know plenty of my friends and cousins who are still divers today have had, 15 plus encounters with a great white shark. Luckily for them, they live to tell these tales. But it is one of the risks of the job. So we have fish come in on day boats, and it comes in, late at night after the guys have been fishing that previous day, and we're in here early birds in the morning, on daybreak or just before the guys are in the factory, and we're straight into cutting that fish. We take our blue cod, it comes off the boats in big insulated bins we call dolabs, covered in ice, and we get it straight onto the table, and the guys are whacking those fillets off, those beautiful white fresh fillets. Whack them off. They go into our 2 kilo branded boxes. We have our own brand of blue cod, Chatham Blue, that really identifies the difference that we've brought to the value chain. And we put those boxes into a freezer, and we get it down to minus 45 as quick as we can. So the key for us is to ensure that we're looking after that fish the second it comes over the surface out of those pots into a slurry, and then we whip the fillets off and into a blast freezer and really crank it down to minus 45 and lock that flavour and that freshness in. So it's essentially what we're focusing on a daily basis.
Often the concept of seafood sustainability can be a hackneyed cliche, prosecuted by urban types for whom a single-dimension argument exclusively about the environment denies the need for a broader, deeper and more inclusive approach to commercial, cultural and resource sustainability, which of course are equally as important. For Del, the concept of sustainability demands an holistic view.
Sustainability, I look at it a bit differently to a lot of people. It is an important word, and it's important. It's a very important concept. Out here, we've just simplified it even further, and it's really about sustainability for us is about survival as a community, as an industry, and as something that we love and that we've done for centuries. So it's about survival for us. So when we look at our practices, when we look at what we're doing within our business and around the community, we look at it from a survivability point. How are our future generations going to be able to survive in this environment and make a really good living? Well, one of the keys to that is the strength of our resource. If we've got good fish stocks in the sea, then we will survive and we'll have a great life and a great future, as will our kids and our grandkids. So that's our focus when we're looking at how we manage that resource, how we look after the stocks, and how we work with fishers.
Wild caught seafood is so often seen as a resource in desperate decline. However, there are many fisheries and fishers around the world for whom wild caught seafood is not only their business, but it is truly their life. For these folk, many of whom are the next generation catchers, protecting and promoting their resource is not only an ethical obligation, but it makes smart commercial sense.
Wild caught seafood, and I'm just going to speak on behalf of wild caught seafood because that's my background. I think we have an incredible resource, not only on the island, but in many parts of the world. And I think the next generation of fishermen and women in the industry coming through are going to focus a lot on their fishing practices on the sea and in the sea to ensure that how they are extracting seafood is done in a way that's really, really beneficial and with really low impact on the environment. That's obviously important because it's our future, it's our industry, it's our livelihood. So I think we'll see a lot of shift in the way that seafood is harvested out of the ocean, and then I think we're going to see a big shift in the way the industry as a whole plays with that beautiful, seafood when it gets into our hands. It's obviously doing as little as possible and getting it in front of people in a raw state, in a fresh state, in a whole state is really important, but also thinking about how we can deliver to customers in a way that really minimises waste, that utilises all parts of the fish, and that gives people the confidence to have a crack at experimenting in their kitchens in a really convenient way, I think is going to be a big part of the future. And that's already starting to happen, obviously, and will continue to happen. There's obviously, we look at the health of people in general, the way they want to dive into their health a lot more. I think COVID's really, really changed the landscape. People are thinking more about healthy eating, about eating at home, eating with family more, celebrating, local foods, celebrating quality food, and looking at natural and sustainable ways to improve their health. And I think, seafood ticks all of those boxes, and it's going to be really exciting to see how our industry, unfolds globally, locally, going into the future. So I'm bloody excited about it, to be honest.
For many who have grown up in a small rural community, the sense of pride and commitment is deeply embedded in their DNA. While there are many challenges, Chatham Island Food Co continues to grow and innovate. Their focus has always been on working with the best local fishermen to produce seafood of outstanding quality, whilst adhering to sustainable fishing practices, and with a staunch commitment to their community and its future.
What gets me up in the morning, mate, is the people I work with and the product that I work with. It's really that simple. It sounds really cliche, but I'm working with my cousins, my mates. I'm working with fishermen that have been doing it for generations. I'm working with fishing families that have got fish in their blood. They're passionate. We're working with a beautiful, iconic, unique product, and I'm doing something that I think future generations are going to be able to pick up and take and you know, and grow from it.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. A Deep in the Weeds production. I'm John Susman. Follow us on Instagram at Fishtales Seafood Podcast, or email us at fishtalespodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay tuned for more tales from beneath the surface of the seafood world every Friday on your podcast app.